All right, welcome everybody to day 4 of the Big Blue Button World Conference 2021. It is my pleasure to introduce Stephen Mugi, who is our keynote speaker today, which will be talking about the Big Blue Button Foundation. And I'm going to read Stephen's formal bio, and then I'm going to embellish it just a little bit. So Dr. Stephen Mugi is an associate professor at the Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. His areas of expertise include technology entrepreneurship and commercialization, non-traditional settings for innovation and entrepreneurship, business ecosystems, communities, platforms, and interconnected systems that combine these structures, and business models of technology entrepreneurs, especially in non-traditional settings. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Steve for 12, 14 years now, and Steve should be credited with a very big reason why Big Blue Button exists. So back in 2007, when I first met Richard Allam, the creator of Big Blue Button, Richard had been a master's student. He's finishing up his thesis in the Technology Innovation Management program at Carleton, and he had written Big Blue Button. He'd written the first version of it. It took him about a year, and it was at use in one faculty, and that was the TIM program. And there were a couple instructors that were using it, one of which was Steve. And I can remember like it was yesterday, I was very interested in what Richard was doing, but I wanted to make sure that if I quit my job full time and went in for this, that there was something here. And so I went into Stephen's office really with an open mind, and Stephen was so enthusiastic about Big Blue Button, the project, the potential, so supportive that I thought, okay, this is worth it. Let's go for this. And that led down the road where Richard and I started Blindside Networks. We open sourced Big Blue Button. We got it going as a community project and really just pushed on it and built a whole ecosystem around it. And so I want to, give the floor to Stephen. He's going to talk about the foundation, which was actually informed in part by other very successful open source projects and what were the characteristics of those open source projects. And we were very much intent on fully leveraging what a thriving, healthy open source project could both do for both the social benefit of it, which I spoke a bit about yesterday in terms of like education is so important to the world, but also the entrepreneurial opportunities which such a project, a successful project provides, but it all depends on a healthy ecosystem and the elements to support that. So with that, I will turn it over to Stephen.
Well, thank you very much, Fred. And I also remember very fondly the meeting that you're referring to in my office at Carleton. And it's wonderful to see how far we've come in the time since then. So I'm going to bring up my slides here. It's a great pleasure to speak with you today. So I'm talking to people today about an organization who has been working behind the scenes for since the earliest days of Big Blue Button in the benefit of everyone who's here on this call and everyone who was on the developer call yesterday and everyone who was on the educator call on the previous day. This is the Big Blue Button Foundation, which, well, let's see what that is on the next slide here. This is a vendor-neutral, membership-based, not-for-profit company, and it's the owner of the intellectual property of the Big Blue Button open source project. So it acts as custodian of things like all of the IP that the Big Blue Button community builds, and it gives it a legal owner, which has a lot of benefits in Western law. If you're a community without a legal entity, you don't have status to do some things that you would if you had an organization that's legally incorporated and can be an identity for that can stand behind the community. So back when we founded the Big Blue Button Foundation, we had a statement of purpose here to say that the purpose of the corporation is to enhance the value of remote students' learning and to reduce the costs of institutions. So this was an objective that we set out a very long time ago, and it's in our legal documents of incorporation, but it still stands up very well here today. First and foremost, you see the students, the learning outcomes that are the mission of the foundation. Second of all, you see about delivering online education. And it's couched here in economic language, but the point really is about making, in many cases, online education possible at a reasonable cost where it may not have been before. Okay, so that's the purpose of the Big Blue Button Foundation. Legally, it's incorporated federally in Canada. It's corporation number 759935-8. And we incorporated this back in August of 2010. So this has been around for a while. And then the legal structure under which this was created was the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, a legal entity that can stand behind Big Blue Button. The Big Blue Button Foundation maintains a set of legal documents to give a legal entity behind the open source project. So this is a list of the most important documents there. It has a set of bylaws that we're bound to by law. There's a membership agreement of what it means to be a member in the Big Blue Button Foundation. The foundation maintains the contributor agreement. So this is the document that everybody signs who is contributing code into the Big Blue Button open source project. Contributors keep all rights, titles, and interests to their contribution, but they provide a license to Big Blue Button Inc., the legal name of the Big Blue Button Foundation. And then there's an intellectual property policy that the foundation maintains that's about things like the Big Blue Button logos and trademarks and the conditions under which they can be used and they can't be used. So all of that is the role of the foundation. What we know from open source foundations, the most successful ones all over the world in a whole host of different domains, is that communities do things very, very, very well. Where an entity like an open source foundation can help is the things that communities don't do well, like this legal entity and to be able to own things. But the foundation exists to support these various communities around Big Blue Button. So a few things about what the foundation does, kind of past and present. There's some costs of operating a not-for-profit company. So the foundation takes care of all of that, hosting the board elections, preparing the required reports, doing the banking, the member meetings that are required under our articles of incorporation, articles of continuance. Okay, so that all falls on the foundation. The Big Blue Button Foundation can also serve as a member in other organizations. So this is where Big Blue Button's membership in the Open Source Initiative comes from, for example. It's the Big Blue Button Foundation that has that membership, the Free Software Foundation, the Open Invention Network that can be so helpful for members that are facing any disputes around intellectual property and open source licenses, and then a whole variety of other organizations that Big Blue Button can have membership in because there's a foundation. The foundation takes its membership fees and then it spends them on behalf of the Big Blue Button community. So its past activities there have been paying for legal work. So things like securing trademarks around the world on the Big Blue Button logos and brands, things around copyright, all matters related to intellectual property. The foundation has in the past funded some audits of the Big Blue Button software, continuing this back into the community. So this is things like one of the earliest audits was around accessibility, around the legislations that we have here in Canada and in Ontario around the access for Ontarians with disabilities, looking at Big Blue Button and compliance with these best practices and guidelines around being as accessible to everyone as we can possibly make it. And then that audit then went and influenced the developer community who could go then and act on those recommendations. There was an audit of intellectual property going into Big Blue Button. So open source projects are very complex systems that consume many, many other open source projects. And those of you who have been in open source a while will understand some of the challenges that can arise with license compatibility and the vast numbers of licenses that are possible on an open source project that not all necessarily work well with one another. So that clean IP audit was around making sure that when a commercial firm, perhaps providing products or services to a university or deploying Big Blue Button software at an educational institution, can be assured that the licensing for Big Blue Button is clean, detected detected any problems that existed, and then let the community go out and address those problems, finding alternatives for some components in some cases, and just getting licensing cleaned up to be in the very clean state of licensing that we have the Big Blue Button project in today. There were multiple audits at various times around security of Big Blue Button, contracting with third parties to take a look at different aspects of the software and then reporting those results back into the community so that the developers could address what was found there. And again, that was a stepping stone to the mature and solid system that you have today. The foundation's also been involved in events, so supporting things like developer summits, which were a particularly big deal before the pandemic when people could travel, but we're expecting to see those to be important again in the future somewhat, where sometimes it makes sense to bring people together to the same physical place to do things. Lots of things work very well remotely. Sometimes the developer summits were very effective ways of moving the project forward around particular technical tasks. And then user events like this one, things that we do online, things that we do in all sorts of forums. The Big Blue Button Foundation can be an active supporter of that, taking revenues from our membership fees and then spending them on behalf of the Big Blue Button community. So lastly, there is the Big Blue Button Foundation maintains the commercial support page at bigbluebutton.org. So one of the things that institutions and educators can do when they go to the Big Blue Button website, if they don't want to install Big Blue Button themselves and go to the effort of maintaining it, staffing that information technology staff in order to do that, or doing it yourself, you can pay others to do that work for you. And the commercial support page has links to companies that are members of the Big Blue Button Foundation that can, for example, maintain systems, they can provide technical support, they can produce on a contractual basis extensions to the software to be contributed back into the community. So the foundation maintains this commercial support page, and the way to get on that commercial support page in part is to become a member of the foundation. Now that's looking at today and in the past. We believe, the members of the Big Blue Button Foundation and me, that the time is right here for us to do more than we have been so far. So while the Big Blue Button Foundation's been working quietly in the background on behalf of everyone here, this is an opportunity here with the Big Blue Button World event and the attention that we're getting here to perhaps grow the membership, perhaps do more with the foundation than what we have been doing thus far, or doing recently. The surge of interest in Europe and Germany and Austria, and many of the presentations here today, there's lots, I think, that the foundation can do. So here's just a partial list of some things. We can certainly do more around events, audit, and advocacy in all of its different forms to the benefit of the community. I see a role here of the Big Blue Button Foundation in fostering research, in recognizing research into online learning, to participation in online classes, to the sorts of analytics work that we can do with the data that comes out of online learning systems, doing that in an ethical, responsible way that complies with local regulation. Lots to be said here about this. I'm a researcher. My interest in Big Blue Button originally was as a user needing to deliver online courses, and then all the interesting challenges around online education. And I think the foundation could be active there. We've heard from some of the presenters on previous days that they are working on their contributions, and their involvement in Big Blue Button is connected with graduate work that they're doing at a university. That's great. I think the foundation could reward that, both incentivizing research, publicizing and disseminating the results of research, and rewarding really strong research, perhaps through competitions or awards or some such. So these would be things that I'd be going back to the Big Blue Button Foundation membership with and discussing, are these things that we want to do here going forward. We could certainly do more around trademark and legal enforcement. This can be time-consuming work to send out the letters around the infringements that we find online. And generally people respond to these very quickly. But that work needs to be done. And the foundation could take the responsibility of having having interns with the required training and skill levels to do some of this work. We could do more around recognizing contributions into the project, recognizing novel applications of Big Blue Button, and getting the good news out around that work. The Big Blue Button Foundation could do more around sponsorship of activities that support online learning in Big Blue Button, and very open and interested in the ideas from the members as well, especially those members that may choose to reach out and join us that haven't been involved before. So in putting this together, Fred had recommended we give you some backstory on where the Big Blue Button Foundation came from. So I just have a few slides on that. You saw this slide from Fred in the developer session yesterday and on previous days about originating at Carleton University. This is one of the shots up on a whiteboard of the early discussions around architecting the system, anchored around some components that are quite different than the way it operates today. But this was the early days of Big Blue Button in 2007, getting it up and working. The context of that, thank you, Fred, for the kind introduction, was a graduate program in technology innovation management, emphasizing technology entrepreneurship and commercialization. So in my graduate program at Carleton that I'm the director of now, although I wasn't at the time in these early days of starting Big Blue Button, we take experienced engineers and computer scientists, business professionals, people who are mid-career with a whole variety of skills, technical and business, and help transform them into a path of being an entrepreneur, completing the program with their degree and with their own startup. We also have a segment that are interested in supporting entrepreneurship in various ways, and a segment of students that are interested in doing entrepreneurial things inside existing companies. So just some of that background there. This was the context in which we saw an opportunity. We needed to deliver online courses, and then we nurtured and encouraged this to happen. And from that spark, we'll have all of the good things that we've seen here today. Okay. So that timeline, what Richard Allam's Master of Engineering thesis in 2006, first thesis completed in the Technology Innovation Management program around open source software and businesses building products and services on top of open source software. And these were hot research questions at the time in the mid 2000s of how you give something away for free and build successful businesses on it. Well, lots of companies do that. And this whole research program there was contributing to our knowledge about how that happens. And Blindside Networks, Richard, as the architect, was one of the early innovators in that space. 2007, we started using an early version of Big Blue Button for online classes. We incorporated the foundation in 2010, and in 2013, I joined that as executive director, taking on that role, reporting into the board of directors and the membership of making sure this work of the foundation happened. Okay, so we've been at this for a while, is the point that I wanted to leave you with there. For September 2014, that was when we held our first annual members meeting, elected the first board of directors, and then membership renewals continued after that. Okay, and we think now's the time to grow this and do more. I'm a researcher. Research strongly influences my approach to things here. And I could talk about research all day, but I'm just going to put up one view here that is, it's a view of the way in which we can have an engine for growth around open source software, encouraging participation in this virtuous circle. And the basis for this is that there's many ways of organizing a successful open source project. You can have a project that's managed essentially under a single company that does all the contributions and solicit contributions from the community that can work, and we see lots of successful things like that. There's also this notion of a community-based open source project. And from the earliest days of Big Blue Button, that was what we were striving for. So not one company, but many organizations, some for profit, some with other purposes, that are contributing to Big Blue Button. And of course, the communities of individuals who get involved for their own reasons. So see over here on the left is the community. That's what was the focus of yesterday's session. And this is one of the best ways you can contribute to the success of Big Blue Button, especially if you have software development skills, would be getting involved in the community, filing bug reports, making contributions, eventually becoming a contributor to the Big Blue Button project. And the community works as a meritocracy of individuals. One of the sources for those contributions tends to be the organizations that employ some of the people in the community and support their contributions into Big Blue Button. And this is what we would call a business ecosystem. And the Big Blue Button Foundation, just the governance of all of this, puts a lot of thought into fostering this commercial ecosystem. Companies that can build products and services on top of Big Blue Button, who then find it in their rational economic interests to have their contributions contributed back. So there can be lots of reasons for getting involved in the community. One might be to directly support the company that you're employed with, who is offering products and services on top of Big Blue Button. The developers contribute to the platform. The platform then benefits this commercial ecosystem over here. So individuals absolutely contribute to the Big Blue Button community. Companies, organizations, consider getting involved in the ecosystem around Big Blue Button and the Big Blue Button Foundation that provides governance to all of this. That's another way in which you can contribute to all the good things happening around Big Blue Button. So currently, there's 5 members in Big Blue Button. These are also the organizations that you see when you go and take a look at the commercial support page at the BigBlueButton.org website. They're located all over the world, and the way the membership works, these organizations, they all have standing in the Big Blue Button Foundation membership. So that was the vendor neutral idea that we had on the very first slide that I showed, that when you get involved in Big Blue Button membership, the Big Blue Button Foundation acts on behalf of its members, and you have support of that. And you can go and read more about those organizations on the commercial support page. And then along with that, you're interested, you've got a company building products and services on Big Blue Button or adding active support. One way to get involved here and to get your company up there would be to join the Big Blue Button Foundation. And I'll talk about membership in just a second. There's some additional requirements as well that come from the community, in the sense that we're looking for members in the foundation to be active on the mailing list, to be answering questions, to be providing support into the open source software project for free. But that's something that, that many of you are already doing. It's a wonderful community, Big Blue Button. All of those members that we just spoke of, the 5 members that we have today, they're all at the industry A membership level. So this is an annual cash contribution into the Big Blue Button Foundation, and then some expectations around providing support in the community. There's a whole variety of other membership levels here that were established when we put the foundation together in the first place. The strategic member level, the idea there was, if we've got a big multinational corporation who finds it just as easy to allocate 100K as it does to allocate 5K, we wanted to have an opportunity there for them to get involved. Come in as a strategic member. That strategic membership includes a seat on the board of directors. Some of the other levels elect board members, but at the current time, we have board members for all of our foundation members. And then there'd be some other benefits that go along with strategic membership. So most of our members are industry A's. The Industry B member answers one of the questions that was posed yesterday in the developer talk of how do I get involved and get my company noticed, providing services and support for Big Blue Button when I'm just a startup. I'm new at this. I don't have a lot of resources. That's what the Industry B membership was all about. It has additional criteria on how you qualify as an Industry B member, but this is meant for companies that are just starting out. If you're at the startup phase, you can pay much lower membership fees, come in as an Industry B, and get all the benefits of Industry B membership. Okay, so we are definitely looking for early stage companies, entrepreneurs, things that when you're just starting out, to get involved as well. You don't have to be an established player that's been here from the beginning to get involved and benefit from the foundation. There's a membership tier here for academic members. So this would be where colleges and universities or boards of education or private education companies who want to get involved and have a role here in the foundation can come in as members. There's a notion of an associate member, which is a category for organizations that don't fit the other tiers above. And then we've got the notion of an individual member, where the way this is written up right now in the governance documents, individual members are appointed by the executive director and the board of directors, and they're for outstanding contribution. So this is the way things sit now. One of the things that the membership and the board of directors is going to be doing in the coming year is taking another look at this membership structure and seeing if it's the right structure we want for the future. We've had a lot of change recently, activities and interests. This surge of interest out of Europe, for example, where the organizations that are involved tend to be connected with the university rather than a commercial provider in a lot of cases. So we want to have a place for all of that here. Working with them today as a partner, but figuring out how to get a relationship here around the foundation that owns the copyright and intellectual property and is the custodian of that on behalf of the members. Okay, I had intended this to be a short and concise overview. Next steps. If you're interested in becoming a member, reach out to us. Happy to share the governance documents, have some conversations about what that would entail and what tier of membership and what sort of timing might be right for you. Okay, that's me finished. I'm going to turn that back over to Fred.
Thanks, Stephen. That was great. For those of you in the forum or in the user list, if you have any questions, please feel free to type it into the chat. We wanted to leave time to kind of go through anything about the foundation. And as Stephen mentioned, it's actually been behind the scenes because there is a legal entity that owns the copyright and the trademark. That's Big Blue Button Inc. And it is our interest to restart the foundation with the memberships to provide a Commonwealth opportunity for companies who are interested in growing the Big Blue Button project to have some way to come together, like a vendor neutral. So it is a foundation that will be, has Steve as executive director, but is largely membership driven.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Fred. So each of these terms here in the top line is important. Vendor neutral, no particular company dominates. The foundation is neutral to its members. Membership base, so it exists on behalf of the membership, and it is organized as a not-for-profit company. So that gives us legal status to do things like to send out a letter if there's a trademark infringement as the owners of that. So I can take Roland's question. Is the foundation also the owner of the Big Blue Button brand? Well, the foundation is the owner of all of the intellectual property. And components of that brand would be things like the trademarks. So the stylized bee is a protected trademark, and the foundation is the owner of that on behalf of the community. I hope I've answered that question. Could you say more about that, Dwayne? And it's a good chance here to reinforce a point about the scope of the foundation. The foundation is there to do the things that the community has difficulty doing or doesn't do well. And they complement one another. That's one of the points of that resource flow diagram earlier. Communities are very, very good at voluntary participation and produce some great software. The foundation helps with the things that a community can't necessarily do well on its own.
There's a good question from Nadia. Still rather confused. What's the difference between Blindside Networks, BigBlueButton Inc., and BigBlueButton Foundation?
Okay, let me take a quick answer to that, and Fred, you may have a comment on that as well, from the Blindside Network side of things, as well as the BigBlueButton side of things. So those organizations are companies, and on our membership page here, you'll see Blindside Networks there as a member of the BigBlueButton Foundation. So Blindside Networks, they have a seat on the board of directors, but then so do these other organizations here have a member on the board of directors of the BigBlueButton Foundation. And others can get involved by joining as well.
Right, and just speaking like on behalf of Blindside Networks is a separate company, and we very consciously set up a different legal company, BigBlueButton Inc., so there would be no confusion in the marketplace as to who owns what. There is only one owner of the BigBlueButton trademark, copyright, source code, intellectual property. That's BigBlueButton Inc. Anything else is just a separate legal company, a separate legal entity, whether it's wherever it's based in the world.
Yeah, good answer, Fred. And there's a very strong precedent for this in the open source software world of successful open source organizations that have attracted community contributions being set up that way. So maybe you'll be familiar with the Apache Software Foundation or the Eclipse Foundation or the Linux Foundation, right? Just naming off some of the largest ones. But there are dozens and dozens of organizations like the BigBlueButton Foundation supporting successful open source projects, all with their own structures and particular arrangements in order to support their communities. So there's a question around BigBlueButton Inc. BigBlueButton Inc. is the legal name of the BigBlueButton Foundation. Colloquially, we refer to it as the BigBlueButton Foundation, but if you go back to our articles of incorporation, BigBlueButton Inc. is what they say. So, and that's also quite a standard practice. Yeah, so there's a question in chat about a potential for a global campaign to get universities to adopt BigBlueButton instead of proprietary software. I'd be all for that. Let's have a conversation, and you can count on my full support and the support of the BigBlueButton Foundation in making those sorts of things happen. So thank you for the comment in chat. That's exactly the scope of things that I'd be very interested in doing. So there's a question about receiving funding from universities and colleges who use BigBlueButton. So the opportunity to receive funding from universities and colleges would be if those organizations chose to join as a member. The other way is through commercialization, in the sense that these member companies, many of them support colleges and universities, earning revenues from that support, and then these companies become members, or are members of the BigBlueButton Foundation. So that's the indirect stream of support. But colleges and universities who want to do more, who want to, for example, be on the board of directors, to have some influence on how the foundation allocates the resources that we have to support the Big Blue Button project, they're very welcome to come in as academic members and participate in that way. It's yet another way of making a contribution. We found that many colleges and universities, they want to consume. They are looking for a solution to their problem around delivering education, and that's fine. Those that want to get involved here in the foundation, we welcome you, and we'd love to bring you on board as members.
So Nadia writes, can we see a list of colleges and universities which are members? And I believe, Steve, at this point, we actually don't have any members from colleges and universities.
That's correct. Exactly, Fred. So we have in the past, we don't currently, but that's a possibility, right? So if you're here representing a college or university and you think this is something that you want to get involved in, well, reach out and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, and there is an academic membership. And Nadia, it's probably not fair to maybe blame any university and college, because we've not promoted the Big Blue Button Foundation in any way in the last 6 years.
Right.
Part of that is because the commercial companies that were involved got really busy, and it turned out that it was more efficient in some ways to just kind of focus on building up our businesses. And remember, this was pre-COVID time. Big Blue Button has changed a lot in the last 14, 16 months. It is global, 55 languages, some very active use of it around the world. And so our purpose here in doing this keynote was to highlight and to share with everybody that there is a foundation. Well, there is a legal entity, Big Blue Button Inc. It is a membership-based organization. So we use the term foundation to refer to it. And we invite people to join and help grow. So, the foundation was always there. Because we didn't really promote the membership or that, obviously didn't hurt Big Blue Button in any significant way. A lot of the commercial companies picked up the slack by holding, funding the summits, the online conferences like we're doing now. But it's really, I think, an opportunity to bring together a lot of organizations that are starting to build heavily on Big Blue Button. Some may not be able to join because for whether it's they cannot join a foundation, but they can more easily maybe give money to a commercial company to implement features for them. And this is what's happened a lot in the past. So many of the commercial companies you see listed here, a portion of the revenue has probably come from companies that have looked to accelerate development of Big Blue Button and came to them and said, hey, you guys are close to the project. Can we just pay you to do it? It's a little more complex to do it through the foundation. But if you look at other successful open source projects, they all have a very strong foundation that advocates on their behalf and supports activities around the world. So we look at the foundation as not the absence of it, but just an opportunity to better support with a legal entity that we had set up initially for the copyright, then added it, making sure it was membership based. And as Stephen said, there's documents are all there for it, the membership agreement, the bylaws, everything is ready to go. All the companies that are listed here have recently become members again. Each of them paid $5,000 US to join the membership. And then that money is going to be put to the best use based on input from the members. So we really want to, make it possible that we could enable more companies around the world that may look for a closer relationship with the project. And it doesn't take away from anything they're doing to support people in the community, to develop enhancements to the product, like Liongate did with the background blur. Just another way to build a group of people, build an organization that's very well proven that if you have an open source project, it's really good to have a foundation behind it that can advocate on its behalf and support whatever the community wants, is trying to do. And that's what Big Blue Button Foundation is. And just in terms of ebbba.org, it's not an exclusive like ebbba.org, which you'll see a talk about later today, is a European-based company, I think not for profit, but though it may be a different term for it, that is there to have legal standing in Europe and advocate upon Big Blue Button. So we fully support it from the foundation, right? Like they can use the Big Blue Button logo, they can use the Big Blue Button trademark. Like we would love to see an EBBBA in all major continents of the world. And that will just make the project even more successful. So lots of ways here, but the Big Blue Button Foundation is meant to be a supportive role to do whatever the maximum benefit would be for the community.
Yeah, good summary, Fred. So we often have people and organizations coming forward asking, how can I participate more? How can I contribute more? And there's many, many ways. One of them would be becoming a member of the foundation. So that's available to you if that is a way that you choose to come forward and participate and contribute.
So there's a question, Steve, I know with a few more minutes left, how individuals become members. I think there's something in the foundation's membership to account for that.
There's an individual membership class that is intended for appointment of longtime contributors. That's the way the membership tiers were set up in the past. It's not really intended for individuals who are just getting involved here for the first time, and it's an appointed role. So the way you would get involved, it would be really through an organization. The members of the Big Blue Button Foundation are organizations for the most part, except for that individual tier. You can get very active in the community through the meritocracy, by contributing, by doing bug fixes, by getting involved. The foundation is meant to complement that by giving a place for organizations to contribute. And feel free to add to that, Fred, if you like.
Now, the foundation wasn't meant to be like 15 individual members, like individual persons. It was meant for companies and universities and colleges, academic members, to come together as sort of like fairly significant members. The individuals can collaborate, of course, in the community and in many, many other ways. But if you look at other foundations, they're usually membership-based. Thinking of the Rust Foundation, which started up recently, with a decent amount of contribution required. So I think that our documents, it was like 5,000 for a Class A industry member. And there was also an in-kind contribution as well, like an equal at least 10,000 US in kind. And that would have been like contribution, developer, contributing to the project. So there's many ways for an individual to become active in the community, but the foundation is meant to be like a membership based and to have like a not insignificant contribution, because the intent is the foundation would have the means to provide some significant support to the community.
Mm-hmm. That's right, Fred. In many cases, the membership of the Big Blue Button Foundation are the employers of many of the contributors in the development community. I'd add that point as well. Okay, thanks. Let's wrap it up there, Fred.
Yeah, so we only have a moment left. Steve, thank you very much for the presentation. The recording will be available to community shortly, and we hope we can get some more companies involved in the foundation to better support. So thanks everyone for joining. Definitely go on to the next session. You're going to get, actually, it's a very nice follow-on, Lucas Mosek, chairperson at EBBA, the European Big Blue Button Association, giving advocacy for Big Blue Button in Europe. And then that will be also, that session time slot was shared by Cliff Ashford, Monash University, which is talking about they're building a proctoring tool on top of Big Blue Button. So 2 great talks coming up.
Thanks, Fred. I'm looking forward to both of them. And thanks everyone for having me. Bye.